Back in 1933, if you were standing on a street corner in the middle of the Great Depression, the world looked pretty rigid. Every car and truck on the road was essentially a noisy, soot-covered box held together by heavy iron and wooden frames. It was a time of function over form, and let's be honest, most vehicles back then were ugly. Then, out of nowhere, this silver pill-shaped object comes gliding down the highway. It has no massive radiator grille, no rattling fenders, and no visible engine. It looks more like a submarine for the road or a UFO that took a wrong turn at Mars. This was the Diamond T Doodlebug, and it is quite possibly the most radical vehicle ever built that history managed to lose. To understand why this thing looked like it came from the year 2000, we have to look at a massive corporate image makeover. At the time, Texaco was trying to win a war against coal. Most Americans heated their homes with coal, but it was filthy. It left ash and soot everywhere. Texaco wanted to convince people that oil was the clean, high-tech fuel of the future. But there was a problem. You can't deliver the future in a greasy, clanking truck from 1910. So they hired the biggest names in industrial design, men like Norman Bel Geddes and Walter Dorwin Teague. These guys were the rock stars of a movement called streamlining. They didn't just want to build a better truck. They wanted to build a rolling billboard that would make every housewife in America stop and stare when it pulled into her driveway. The result was the Doodlebug, and the engineering behind it was honestly a bit insane. For starters, look at the height. Most fuel tankers are these towering, intimidating giants, but the Doodlebug was only 5 feet 11 inches tall. It was shorter than the average man standing next to it. By keeping the center of gravity that low and wrapping everything in a smooth steel skin without any door handles or steps sticking out, they created a silver bullet that could slice through the wind. They even used compound curved glass for the windshield. In 1933, that was a technological miracle. Most cars wouldn't see glass like that for another 20 years. But the real what were they thinking moment happened when you looked for the engine. To keep that smooth aerodynamic shape in the front, the engineers decided to shove the motor all the way in the back. Behind that massive 1,500-gallon fuel tank sat a Hercules inline-6 engine. It was an 8.2-liter beast that put out about 125 horsepower. Think about that for a second. You have a heavy, hot engine sitting right behind a giant tank filled with thousands of gallons of highly flammable gasoline. It's not exactly what we'd call safety first by today's standards, but back then it was the only way to make the design work. However, moving the engine created a problem that sounds like something out of a comedy sketch. In the 1930s, drivers didn't have digital dashboards or RPM sensors. They shifted gears by listening to the sound of the motor. But with the driver at the very front and the engine 20 feet behind him, muffled by a massive tank of liquid, the guy behind the wheel couldn't hear a thing. He had no idea if the engine was about to redline or if it had just stalled out. The fix? It's one of the most brilliant, low-tech solutions in history. They rigged up a microphone in the engine compartment and put a speaker in the cab. The driver was literally listening to a live podcast of his own motor just so he knew when to change gears. It was effectively the world's first artificial engine sound system, 90 years before modern car companies started doing it to make electric cars sound cooler. The Doodlebug wasn't just a showpiece, though. It was a worker. It featured advanced air-actuated controls for the clutch and the gearbox to make it easier to handle such a massive load. Texaco built a small fleet of these, and they became instant celebrities. They'd pull into a small town, and everything would stop. It was the Tesla Cybertruck of 1933. People either loved it or thought it was the weirdest thing they'd ever seen. But here is where the story gets a bit depressing. Usually when someone builds something this revolutionary, we save it. We put it in a museum or someone keeps it in a barn. But for the Doodlebug, nothing. In the world of commercial delivery trucks, if a tool stops being useful, it gets tossed. Once those specialized parts became too hard to find, and once the futuristic look started to feel like yesterday's news, these trucks were simply retired. Most historians think they were scrapped during the metal drives of World War II. Others believe they were left to rot in forgotten scrapyards because you couldn't really repurpose a pill-shaped tanker for anything else. As of today, not a single original Diamond T Doodlebug is known to exist. It has become a ghost truck. We have the photos, we have the blueprints, and we have the legends, but the machines themselves have vanished into the fog of history.